Welcome, dear parents and dear families. Welcome to our award ceremony. Yes, it is our pleasure and honor to award these brilliant and diligent students with the certificates that will prove their achievements. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Bojana Golubovic. I come from Serbia, Europe, where I have been teaching logic, philosophy, debate, and theory of knowledge for 15 years now. This is my 5th year working with Capital Debate, and this company, its mission, its staff, and its students have become my American family. I would like to invite Josh to introduce himself and share a short feedback about this week. Josh?
Hello, my name is Josh, and this is actually my second summer with Capital Debate. And as an instructor, however, I actually began working with Capital Debate very early on in my life. In 6th grade, I did my first Capital Debate camp, and it helped me find my voice. And from there on out, I've always been very involved with public speaking. So getting to work with all of your kids this week has been such an amazing experience. I'm always so surprised to see how quickly everybody develops and how quickly everybody improves their skills. They all have created throughout this week such an amazing environment for improvement, and each and every one of them has constructed and learned how to deliver such an amazing speech. So I'm so excited to see that today and see all of their hard work culminating.
Thank you, Josh. So I would like to ask you to open the slide where we have our group so that the parents could see. Yes, our group of future leaders. So, before I call each student dear parents, I would like to express our gratitude for trusting us with your children. As you know, Josh and I made sure to cover all the lessons planned for Public Speaking and Debate 101. You received feedback letters after each day where you learned about what we actually learned during that day. So starting from morning leadership activities, where we learned more about good character, about confidence, goal setting, up to writing a persuasive speech, learning more about persuasive language, learning how to research, how to structure our thoughts, how to structure an argument, and how to present. So your children have improved both in verbal and nonverbal communication, and of course, you will witness their growth today during the showcase presentation. So, dear parents, finally, please welcome the new generation of change makers, leaders, and decision makers. So, the passion they presented while writing their speeches and while delivering their speeches will now justify my words. So, I would like to greet the first student to receive a certificate. So, Owen Kaiser. So, Owen, great job. Congratulations. Um, Owen actually found his way of giving a speech. And that's something even the professional public speakers long to throughout their career. And Owen originality will be presented shortly. Great job, Owen. Thank you. It was a pleasure to facilitate your growth. Justin Ang. Justin, great job. So Justin started by saying that he needs to work a lot on his public speaking, starting with hand gestures and swaying, and you will see how much he improved during this showcase. Great job, Justin. It was a pleasure and honor to facilitate your growth. So the next student to receive a certificate is Rachel Gopalani. Great job, Rachel. So Rachel actually started by saying that, oh, I will not be able to memorize my speech. Oh, how will I deal with note cards in my hands and hand gestures? And you will how much she improved in this field as well. She is now a very confident public speaker, and I would like to share my pleasure and honor to work with you, Rachel, this week. So, our next participant to receive a certificate will be Alicia Zhang. Great job, Alicia. We really enjoyed witnessing your improvement, and you will see how much Alicia succeeded in presenting her values and her ideas. Great job, Alicia. It was a pleasure and honor to facilitate your growth. Thank you. So the next one to receive a certificate of excellence is Aaron Weisman. Great job, Aaron. Thank you for joining us this week. We learned so many things from you. Yes, and we're very happy to facilitate your growth. Hope we will work with you again. Thank you, Aaron. So moving on to our next student, Terence Safarian. Terence, thank you very much. We learned about perseverance and grit from you. Taryn will present what she improved during this week, and dear parents, you will witness that growth. Taryn, great job. Thank you. So, moving on to Darren Liu. Darren, great job. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Um, Darren will just say, "Oh, I improved my facial expression," but he really came to, let's say, excellence in presentation. Great job, Darren, and thank you for joining us this week. And once again, thank you, dear students. It was a pleasure and honor to facilitate your growth this week. So, what your children did this morning, apart from sharing positive feedback to themselves, they also filled out student survey. And during this session, we learned how much a feedback should be appreciated, both positive and constructive. So we will kindly ask you to fill out the parent survey form, because Josh and I, as well as Capital Debate, really need to learn what are our fields of improvement and, of course, what was good. Thank you very much. So this is the link you could use. Now, we would like to inform you about the rest of the programs that we offer during this summer. So if you are satisfied with your child's improvement throughout this week, and if you feel and if your children feel that they want to move forward in this field, this is what we offer till the end of this summer. So if they want to move on into the debate field, so debate 201 will be the next step. So during public speaking and debate 101, they learned how to write an opening speech, which is one kind of a persuasive speech. They learned how to structure an argument, and they learned how to present. Now, at debate 201, they will improve cross-examination, which will mean questioning and answering. They will also learn how to write a refutation speech and the closing speech. So they will learn the most important milestones, let's say, of a debate process. But this session is not a competitive one. Moving on to debate 301, they will get a chance to compete and learn how to write so-called rebuttal or defense speech. Debate 401 would be the highest level of debate, and it's pure competition. And I would like to share what Josh said. That's the funniest part, actually, of debate. Might be the most stressful, but for sure the funniest one. And of course, Club League, and I will talk more about that. But before I move to Club League, I would also like to offer programs such as legal communication, business communication, interpersonal, and STEM. So as the name says, these are the sessions where your children, if they find themselves interested in law, business, science, or they want to improve their interpersonal communication, could join for 1 week as this session is. Now, if you would like your children to participate today with this coupon code NextClass 2020, you will get $50 off for your next camp. Now, if you have any further questions, um, soon the email and the phone number will appear. I hope, yes. So this is an email address where you can contact us, or a phone number. Just call us and ask to learn more about these programs. Now, the other thing that we want to offer, a fresh new league throughout the year, is debate league, and the registration is open. So if you would like your children to participate in monthly debate tournaments, week and to have weekly debate tournaments as well, but through weekly debate practice, weekend workshop, and clinics, by using online resources. So it's something similar to what they had this week, but it will last for a few weeks, and then they will have tournaments at the end. They will have instructors that would facilitate their progress in the field of debate. And if you feel that you would like your children to improve more in this field, we would like to offer this program as well. So if you register until August 14, you will save $100 for this program. Of course, if you want to learn more, you may use the same email and the number to call us for an advice about the improvement of your children. Thank you. So moving on, Josh, I think we're now ready for the showcase, right?
I think so.
Yep. Okay, guys. So, dear parents, our students are ready to present now. So I would like to invite all of our students to turn off their cameras and to invite Terence Safarian to take the floor.
Okay.
Rachel, can you please turn off your camera and mute your mic? Thank you. So, Taryn, the floor is yours. So, Taryn is giving a speech on the topic government regulations of social media companies do more good than harm. But Taryn is presenting from the perspective of con-speaker. So, she will explain the reasons why government should not regulate social media companies. Taryn, you may start as soon as you're ready.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Okay. Is the government really on your side? Why is silencing and ignoring the pain that a very big part of our country is facing initiate any sort of control over the one thing that's giving people a voice? Social media is keeping people informed and showing the truth behind the harsh reality many people are facing today. Pictures, videos, and articles, many people are throwing out their opinions about what's happening around the world. Social media is is giving people a voice and help spread information and even come together. Letting the government take control of this would infringe on people's human rights, silence, alter, and discredit what people are saying, seeing, and believing through political manipulation. Letting the government take control of social media infringes on we the people's basic rights to freedom of speech and privacy. Because social media has been made into something that the people in this country and all around the world can refer to when sharing an opinion or educating others. According to the Washington Post, governments around the world have exploited the unregulated space of social media platforms, converting them into instruments for political distortion and societal control. The report says the speed of disinformation threatens the upend of domestic electoral process, while social media surveillance erodes civil liberties, including free speech. Internet freedom and privacy are very important for maintaining a somewhat free society globally. Having this altered or suddenly made unreliable is taking away from people's voices and ability to have a valued opinion, therefore once again violating people's rights to freedom of speech. Letting the government have control of not only the news but also social media is detrimental to the current Black Lives Matter civil rights movement. Because the government has already gained somewhat of control over what people are seeing over the news, this has transferred misinformation and and hidden the true terror that people are facing in order to find change during protests. Although social media has brought to surface many of the things that the news is choosing not to share. For example, the Guardian news media from American Civil Liberties Union and other civil rights groups are suing Donald Trump and William Barr and other federal officers over the assault on peaceful protesters near the White House. The lawsuit filed in federal court on Washington comes as William Barr, the Attorney General, defended the decision to forcefully remove protesters, claiming that it was necessary to protect officers and federal property. This led to more and more silence and mayhem against peaceful protesters, which is continuing the muteness of what's actually happening in this fight. Although social media has once again brought to surface many brutal events that were not initiated by protesters. The government having control of social media will initiate an opening for government manipulation through social media. Because this is a major threat to our country's so-called democracy, this idea of political persuasion through social media is a major threat. According to phys.com, social media manipulation is getting worse. As more governments use it to manipulate public opinion, it's becoming a rising threat to democracy. There's nothing new about political parties and governments using propaganda. The new normal includes toxic messaging. The government control over social media leads to the harassment and extremely controversial divide on societies. Lastly, letting the government take control of social media will infringe on people's basic human rights, silence protests, and alter what people are seeing and saying through political manipulation. Therefore, government regulation on social media will do more harm than good, and the government should keep its distance for the better of our society. So, is the government really on your side?
Whew, great job, Darren. Thank you very much. So I would like to invite our next speaker. So our next speaker will actually present from proposition, which means that Owen Kaiser will explain why government should regulate social media companies. So, Owen, the floor is yours.
For many Americans, the First Amendment is something that is very important to them, as it should be. But what should be protected by this amendment? Should speech that incites violence or hatred be protected? Should speech that encourages dangerous misinformation be protected? Let's say I go into a crowded movie theater and I scream fire, and while everyone's running to the door, let's say a man named Devin breaks his leg from the stampede. Should I be held responsible? Of course, and I would be. Now let's say I go on Twitter and create a campaign called Reasons I Hate Devin. And this campaign creates a lot of traction and people start following my campaign. And after some time, someone feels incentivized after viewing my campaign to go out and hurt Devin. And they go out and they break his leg. Should I be held partially responsible for creating such hatred towards Kevin? Yes. But will I be prosecuted or get in trouble? No. And I think that's a problem. This is why the government must regulate social media. Because if they don't, dangerous things may go unchecked. For example, misinformation, terrorism, and hatred. Without government intervention, misinformation will go completely unchecked, which will not just affect us in the online world, but in the real world as well. An example of this was when hateful misinformation that spread false information about ethnic minorities in India went unchecked. Sheriff Frankel from the New York Times writes, Facebook is largely responsible for episodes in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and India in which rumors that spread on Facebook led to real-world attacks on ethnic minorities. While this is terrible by itself, by far the worst example of hatred spread through an online social media platform is the Myanmar genocide. Evelyn Duke, a Harvard Law student, writes, "The Time writes that the military harnessed Facebook over a period of years to disseminate hate propaganda, false news, and information posts. The story adds to the known horrors about what the ongoing violence is like in Myanmar, but it should also complicate the ongoing debate about Facebook's role and responsibility for spreading hate and exacerbating conflict in Myanmar and other developing countries. This problem especially impacts those who are already targeted by hatred in their own countries. If the government doesn't step in and regulate this kind of hate speech and violence, if Facebook doesn't step in and regulate this kind of hate speech and violence, then it's up to the government to. Misinformation is not the only reason the government needs to step in. Terrorism is a good enough reason on its own. Terrorists use social media platforms like YouTube, Reddit, Instagram, and Twitter to broadcast their attacks. Max Boot, an author and editorialist from the Washington Post, says, "The New Zealand massacre video, which was announced on Fringe Chatroom 8chan, live streamed on Facebook, reposted on Twitter, and it was discussed on YouTube. This problem impacts the victims' families especially, and also encourages other terrorists to carry out similar attacks. Not only does Facebook and Twitter and Instagram allow terrorists to broadcast their attacks, but it also lets them recruit other people to join their cause." Max Boot also says, "After Zarkozi's death, the Islamic State became even more adept at using social media to inspire lone wolf jihadists to carry out attacks in the West. This impacts all of us, as we as a whole are more vulnerable to terrorist attacks when there are more of them." Another reason we need government intervention in social media is because, frankly, social media platforms don't care about problems such as misinformation and violence as much as they should. In reality, the only time a social media platform will change anything is if they get bad press or they're losing money. Jonathan Warham, a professor of innovation and data science, said, "Explicit rules about what is or is not allowed on these platforms are implemented only when necessary, as they can constrain its expansion and are expensive to implement." I would completely agree with this statement. A clear example is YouTube. Warham said, "Remember the early days of YouTube, when they allowed users to post any type of music, TV show, or film? Only after significant legal threats from the media industry did they begin to pose restrictions on copyrighted material. This problem regarding copyright especially hurts companies such as Netflix or Hulu and musicians who rely on people buying their content to make money. If YouTube can't step in and figure this out, then it's up to the government to." What this argument really comes down to is freedom and how we look at it. Let's take Germany, for example. Do we consider them an oppressive country or dictatorship? No. What about Canada? Do we think of them as oppressive? No. However, in these countries, they do regulate what you can and can't say. For example, in Germany, you cannot spread Nazi propaganda, and in Canada, you can't say anything that's deliberately sexist or racist. I believe this is how social media should be regulated. Not to remove anything that attacks the government or to control the media in any way, but instead to take out things that encourage violence, spread misinformation, or support terrorism. In reality, the everyday person is not going to lose much freedom. The only people who are going to lose freedom are those that choose to abuse it.
Woo, thank you, Owen. Great job. We really enjoyed. So let's see who will speak again from composition and explain why government should not regulate. So our next presenter is Rachel Gopalani. Rachel, the floor is yours. So let's see whether you will convince us that government should not.
Okay. Around the world, social media is a versatile tool that is one of the most popular news sources. In Kenya, 77% of adults rely on social media as a trusted news source. This may seem surprising to you, but in reality, it shouldn't be. Social media is used to spread pictures, videos, songs, posts, but most importantly, news. Believe it or not, we get a lot of our political awareness from it. It's a tool that people trust in because everyone's voices are heard. Social media has grown since we were first introduced to it, and now it's powerful enough to regulate itself. It doesn't need any help from outside forces such as the government. As controlling social media is an infringement of the First Amendment, ultimate censorship of political views, and unnecessary, there's no need for the government to do so. Regulations placed on social media would be blocking the people's rights to the First Amendment, as social media is the most popular and versatile way to express it. Because social media is one of the most critical embodiments of the freedom of speech, placing government regulations on social media is an infringement of the First Amendment. Through social media, we can speak our minds faster than we ever thought possible. Now, social media is at the peak of its influence. The internet, as the most participatory form of mass speech yet developed, is entitled to the highest protection from governmental intrusion. Social media is a safe space, a place in which everyone's voices are heard. Governmental intrusion, however, threatens the safety that social media brings. Social media fosters a politics-rich environment, and letting the government control it would be reducing the spread of new ideas and potential trends. In 2016, Pew Research Center recounted that 62% of U.S. adults get their news from social media. Those who use social media as a news source know that due to the freedom of speech, the report is reliable and challenges the usually one-sided articles from the press. Social media is one of the largest sources of politics, and letting the government control it would prevent anti-administration posts from reaching the public. In 2012, the UN held the World Conference of International Telecommunications in Dubai, and U.S. Delegate Terry Kramer recalled that another U.S. delegate proposed to limit spam. Initially, Kramer thought that this meant unwanted commercial email, but he later found that the delegate meant spam, meaning people's point of views of the government. This is literally government censorship, which penalizes people for speaking their minds about the government. Social media is a significant platform for political perspective with great outreach, and the government would quickly extinguish this outreach. If social media corporations were government regulated, they would be politically polished to idolize the government. The value of speaking one's mind is one of the most remarkable gifts America could have, and government censorship of social media would jeopardize our right to do so. There's no need for the government to regulate social media corporations because they are sufficiently managing any issues that they face. Major companies such as Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat have some of the highest rates of cyberbullying. 37% of cyberbullying teens experience hate through Facebook. However, social media companies have not failed to rise to the challenge. According to the Social Media Monthly, Facebook is giving users the appropriate tools to better communicate their feelings and alleviate the concerns and conflicts that arise with feeling bullied on the web. In 2012, Facebook introduced the "This post is a problem" feature, giving users a direct way of communicating with Facebook employees that a post shows something harmful. Since the invention of this feature, cyberbullying has not been eradicated, but it has declined. By giving users the tools to convey the scale of the problem, it is easy to prioritize the value of all the issues simultaneously occurring across Facebook. No one should be cyberbullied, and the social media companies provide solutions that block off the root of the problem. Thus, there is no need for the government to intrude in such attempts to solve such problems. Large social media companies have a widespread influence and power over a broad audience. The government should not place regulations on social media companies as they are self-sufficient and have a vast outreach that gives people news and a place to express themselves. Social media corporations have a significant impact on our lives. Current movements, protests, even new ideas of how to change the future circulate via an online community. But social media is just a tool given to us. It is we who must decide whether to use it or not. Through social media, people like you and I have the power to change the world. So let me ask you, will you use that power or will you lose it?
Woo! Thank you, Rachel. Great job. So let's see who will now present pro arguments. And parents, you decide whether you're pro or con this topic. So Justin Ang will now present from the perspective of a pro speaker, which means that he will give us the reasons why government should regulate social media companies. Justin, the floor is yours.
From 2006 to 2020, social media usage in the US has skyrocketed from 8% to 80% of the population. Social media has become an important source of interaction and information for millions of US citizens. However, issues still persist with social media, and this prompts debate over the regulatory roles of the US government in social media organizations. The US government should oversee social media by passing laws and cooperating with social media organizations to limit COVID disinformation, terrorism, and privacy infringement. My first argument is the US government should limit COVID disinformation on social media. The Harvard Gazette writes that the US is in the midst of an infodemic, a pandemic of misinformation that includes conspiracy theories, purported treatments, and exaggerations of the country's capability to cope with COVID. The UNDP reports that 66% of Americans have seen incorrect information on COVID. Regarding COVID, on Facebook of 112 million posts, 40% are unreliable. And on Twitter of 178 million tweets, 42% are from bots. The Harvard Gazette stresses that the COVID crisis is unique in that it is a matter of life or death. It is a matter of the individual and how they either stop or spread COVID. The UNDP says that in order for the government to combat coronavirus disinformation, it must create awareness on COVID disinformation and communicate the truth. We have to prevent the loss of lives and livelihoods, prevent the preying on people's fears, the confusion, the scapegoating, the stigmatization that all have profound impacts on our society. My second argument is that the US government should take down terrorist threats. Rand says that domestic and international terrorist organizations use propaganda on social media to recruit, radicalize, and train extremists. ISIS broadcast out its message and convinced 40,000 foreign nationals to join its cause in Syria and launched numerous terrorist strikes in the US and EU. Al-Qaeda Imam Anwar al-Awlaki taught Al-Qaeda's themes, techniques, and tenets and inspired terrorist attacks such as those in Boston. Right-wing, left-wing, and other terrorist organizations and other religious terrorist organizations use social media as well. START finds that in 2016, social media had a role in the radicalization of 88.23% of extremists. Meanwhile, the terrorist speech and social media study from Vanderbilt University found that content removal, account deactivation, alternative narratives, and support services all are policy recommendations for government. My third argument is that the US government should pass privacy protection laws on social media. The Human Rights Watch observes that in 2016, Cambridge Analytica purchased the personal information of 87 million Americans from Facebook to influence the elections. In 2017, an Equifax data breach compromised the credit scores of 143 million Americans. Social media organizations collect and sell data on their users, and their users have no say. Profit, not privacy, is the priority of social media organizations. Pew Research has found that 79% of Americans do not trust that social media companies will admit to their data misuse. The government must step in. The Brookings Institute has found that the EU's General Data Protections Regulation is a model for the US to copy. Users are in control of their own data and make decisions on it. Social media organizations have to disclose how they store and secure their data. This surrounds the principle that people are in control of their own information, and it reassures them. There's basis for this in the US as well. In the Supreme Court case, Carpenter v. the United States, the Supreme Court found that the Fourth Amendment extends to privacy expectations as well as property interests. In conclusion, COVID disinformation, terrorism, and privacy infringement all necessitate the US government's intervention. Out of its commitment to its citizens, people have a right to the US government's assistance and assurance on social media. To continue the exploitation of US citizens on social media is a betrayal of the principles this country was built on. Thank you.
Woo! Awesome job, Justin. Thank you very much. So let's hear what are con reasons for this topic. So Aaron Weisman will be giving a speech from con position, explaining why government should not regulate. Aaron, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay. According to Internet Association President Michael Beckerman, eliminating the ability of platforms to moderate content would mean a world of 4chans and highly curated outlets, but nothing in between. Government should not regulate social media companies for 3 reasons. 1, it will infringe on the First Amendment. 2, it will censor potential political opponents. And 3, it will circumvent Congress's intent with Section 230. Government regulation of social media would cause irreparable harm to our freedoms, liberties, and to our democracy. My first argument is that social media companies should not be regulated because they are privately owned, given the fact that they have their own First Amendment rights to control what's on their platforms. Twitter and Facebook are private companies, and whenever, for example, they remove the president's tweets or QAnon or possibly other things, they have the total authority to do so under the First Amendment, according to the U.S. Supreme Court decisions such as Marsh v. Alabama, Pruneyard Shopping Center versus Robbins, and Lloyd Court versus Tanner. According to Cato.org, the Supreme Court ruled in Marsh v. Alabama that a company town, like a government, could not restrict First Amendment rights, and they also affirmed in Pruneyard Shopping Center versus Robbins that being open to the public did not turn a shopping center into a public forum governed by the First Amendment. And lastly, in 1972, the Supreme Court ruled in Lloyd Court versus Tanner that a shopping mall did not constitute a public forum and thus need not obey the First Amendment. This is important because if the government regulated social media, they could shut down any content that they don't like, especially with today's cancel culture. My second argument is that social media companies have their own First Amendment rights, and if government regulated social media, then they would be able to control the news that many people get, and they would be able to censor their political opponents. According to The Hill, the Supreme Court ruled in Minnesota Voters Alliance v. Monkey that giving government officials the power to decide whether certain speech is political in nature is unconstitutional, because such a vague, open-ended standard carries with it the opportunity for abuse, and the First Amendment prohibits government bureaucrats from this type of speech. This matters because if the government regulated social media, not only would there be less free speech, but our democracy would be in trouble because the authorities would be able to suppress what they don't agree with, like an authoritarian regime such as Putin's Russia. And my third and final argument is that social media should not be regulated by the government because Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 was adopted because Congress wanted to encourage the development of free speech on the internet, which means that they are free of liability for the removal of the content that's posted on their platforms. And Congress's original intent with Section 230 was to ensure private preference of governance as well as to encourage the development of free speech on the internet, according to Cato.org. Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act says that no provider or user of an interactive computer server shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. And this matters because not only would government regulation of social media get in the way of Congress's original intent developing free speech, it also infringe on Americans' freedom of speech. In conclusion, the impact of government regulating social media is a violation of the First Amendment, less freedom and government censorship of political opponents like in Putin's Russia, and a violation of Congress's intent of using Section 230 to create a free and open internet. Dear audience, this is why I strongly believe that social media should not be regulated.
Thank you very much, Aaron. So I hope that Aaron convinced you that government should not regulate, but let's see whether our next presenter will explain why government should. Darren Liu, you may take the floor. Aaron, you may turn off your camera now and mute your mic. It's time for Darren to present his pro reasons. Darren, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Social media and technology have been a major focus of the general public in recent years, and often for all the wrong reasons. After an infamous scandal in 2018, where data from tens of millions of users was sold to data firm Cambridge Analytica, revealed the disturbing power and influence possessed by companies such as Facebook, After this event specifically, you would not be alone in worrying about the safety of your personal information online. Social media companies do not have sufficient authority to punish malicious users and even actively avoid any responsibilities involving dangerous content on their sites. For these reasons, it is critical that the government take part in regulating social media. If an incident involving rhetoric that is deliberately hateful or threatening should arise, it cannot and definitely should not be up to a private corporation to decide whether action should be taken against the parties involved. As a part of the First Amendment, freedom of speech is a fundamental right in America. However, especially in the digital world, this right should be considered a privilege and is constantly abused by those looking to avoid the consequences that should come with their wrongful actions. According to the Anti-Defamation League, more than half of Americans, 53%, say they were subjected to hateful speech and harassment in 2018. That is a disturbing 17% increase from a survey just a year earlier. Companies like Facebook are seemingly unwilling to take action to fight against misinformation, hate, and violence, in no small part due to the fact that offenses like these are all over the internet. If any results are to be seen in counteracting abuse, social media platforms alone are not able to provide the necessary measures to deter potential offenders. This is where the government needs to intervene in order to put more significant consequences in place. Social media companies cannot bear the burden of regulating their own platforms because little to no content posted on forums and sent in chats actually belongs to the company, and therefore they should not possess the right to alter or remove it. In this case, the only party that this responsibility should be entrusted to is the government. Companies are not unaware of the potential risks of allowing virtually anyone to broadcast a message to the rest of the world. However, they have crafted mechanisms where they can avoid any legal consequences for what is released on their site. According to an article for Forbes, they contend that they are not responsible for what users produce and are thus exempt from libel, defamation, and other laws and regulations, and assume no responsibility for what their users communicate. Although these policies are beneficial for the companies, should anything arise that puts their reputation at risk, an attitude like this does not give the firm any motivation to protect its users from what could be dangerous or offensive. In their current state, a company that does not even want to bother with monitoring and filtering their own sites needs federal support to complete this essential task. Large technology corporations should not be trusted when it comes to controlling content due to a conflict of interest between monetary gain and protecting their users. For this reason, it is absolutely critical that the government take part in the regulation of social media. With lax terms of service, companies have made it easy for themselves to overlook content. Simply put, the responsibility of regulating the internet should not be placed in the hands of people whose sole purpose is monetary gain. On June 18th of this year, the Trump campaign posted an advertisement on Facebook, which included a symbol that, according to the Anti-Defamation League, is practically identical to that used by the Nazi regime. The highly controversial ad was allowed to remain on the site for several hours before being taken down. Social media firms rely on ads and data collection for a large part of their income, and their teams value these high-paying customers over using their massive influence to create a safe space for everyday users. Due to this, it is essential that the government have a certain amount of oversight in the operation and regulation of social media platforms. In conclusion, companies managing our primary modes of communication over the internet are not prepared for the responsibility of safeguarding us and our data from those who may seek to exploit it. Without diligent monitoring and tight restrictions, unsuspecting users will constantly be bombarded with misleading information. And every time we enter anything into a form, login page, or even private chat is an opportunity for someone to gain access to our personal data. As a society that relies heavily on the internet, preventing misinformation, data, and identity theft should be of the highest priority. This is why I strongly affirm the resolution that government regulation of social media will do more good than harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Awesome job. So it will be hard for our next presenter, right? A great challenge for our next presenter to explain why government should not. So our next presenter is Alicia Zhang. Alicia, please join the floor and explain why government should not regulate social media companies.
Since the start of 2020, more than 4.5 billion people are using the internet. Of those people, there are over 3.8 billion active social media users, and this number has only continued to increase. I strongly affirm the resolution that the US government should not be allowed to regulate content on social media for these reasons. It would violate the First Amendment, causes the spread of more misinformation, and gives the government the power to silence protest and opposition. The first reason government should not be able to regulate social media content is because it would be a violation of the First Amendment. This amendment specifically stresses the freedom of speech and of the press, and many social media providers utilize this to argue that government regulations would automatically infringe on their constitutional free speech rights. Quoting the Congressional Research Service, which serves the Congress throughout the legislative process, the Supreme Court has recognized that the internet in general, and social media sites in particular, are important places for people, and that social media users employ these websites to engage in a wide array of protected First Amendment activity. Furthermore, a 2018 study by the Pew Research Center found that 68% of US adults use Facebook, 35% use Instagram, and 24% report using Twitter. This evidence shows that should the government impose its own regulations on social media, they would also be imposing upon the constitutional rights protecting social media users through the First Amendment. This would be a huge blow to American ideals, as the government of the country of freedom should not be suppressing the rights of its own citizens. Many that support government regulations of social media content often cite the spread of unregulated misinformation on these websites. Although it is true that there is often false and made up information on social media websites, there is evidence that government regulations may only increase the amount of misinformation being spread. An excellent example of this would be this regulation of social media content in China. In July 2018 alone, there were over 6.7 million cases of false and illegal information, many of these cases coming from China. Referencing the Library of Congress, a law library specifically created by Congress to provide reliable legal materials. One of the various factors propelling an increased spread of misinformation comes from a deep sense of societal insecurity, the increasing politicization and commercialization of information, and a craving for self-expression. In addition, it is also stated that when the government labels something a rumor, that information comes to be seen not as fake, but as something the government doesn't want the public to know. As seen from this evidence, regulating social media only increased the amount of misinformation being spread through these websites, as well as turned social media into a way for people to go against their own government. Should the US government begin to impose their own regulations, the same results, namely an increase in social unrest and misinformation on social media, would likely appear in America as well. In addition, giving the government this kind of power indirectly also gives them the power to silence protests against the government. A prime example of this kind of abuse of power would be from 2011 in Cairo, Egypt. Egyptian citizens were engaged in a revolt against their current president and had used social media as a way to spread the word and organize protests. In retaliation, the government completely severed internet access and cell phone service across all of Egypt. Referencing the Northwestern Journal of Technology and Intellectual Property, one of the top-ranked intellectual property and technology journals in the country, this action was surprising because Egypt originally had liberal internet censorship policies. This is relevant because before the protest, the Egyptian government and United States government had held many of the same regulations on social media. However, several new policies have been made under the country of Egypt's president, restricting what could be said on social media and the internet and effectively stifling the voices of the people as well as the movement to overthrow the president. Not only this event, but numerous other demonstrations of this abuse of power displays how governments can and often have used their ability to regulate social media to silence public protests. In conclusion, allowing the US government to regulate content on social media would violate the First Amendment, infringing on the right to free speech, cause the spread of more misinformation, leading to an increase in social unrest, and gives the government more power to silence opposition, letting them abuse their power to restrict public protests. Dear judge and audience, if you vote for freedom of speech, less social unrest, or fair use of government power, vote for the affirmative.
Woohoo! Thank you, Alicia. So, Josh, thank you. Dear parents, this was our showcase. We sincerely hope that you liked what you heard, that you enjoyed the presentations, both pro and con, and we hope that we confused you just a little bit regarding which side would you choose. If you have any questions regarding improvement of your child, or maybe the best program that your child should, the best program for your child to enroll, then please contact us via email or just call this number. I would also like to remind you that by the end of this week, you will get a report card, individual report card for your child, and you will learn more about the improvement process and also about the fields for improvement, but as well as recommendations for the programs that he or she might join. So, dear students, I would like to invite you to join the panel for the last time. And to give you one big applause. To thank you for these great presentations, to thank you for great time we had with you, and for so many things that Josh and I learned for you. The first one, perseverance. Taryn, go.
I have a question. Are you guys gonna like email the video to us or to our parents?
The office will email the video link to the video to your parents. Yes.
Okay. When do you think that will be?
Well, I hope Monday or Tuesday. Josh? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would assume by Monday or earlier, or Tuesday. I'm
Yes.
not, yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Guys, that was a great performance. I sincerely hope you found your spot on the stage and that you will decide to continue with public speaking in any form, because let me remind you once again, public speaking is a skill and you need to practice it as any other skill. Josh, would you like to add something for the end?
Thank y'all for the great week. It was a pleasure working with you. Y'all are all so bright, and I really hope that you continue with debate. But whatever you continue with in the future, I'm very confident that you will all be very successful with your drive and passion to be successful and work hard.
Thank you once again. Have a great weekend. You deserved it. Bye bye.